This is the Lydian Spin, and you know we're not going to stop. But we would appreciate any help we can get because, look, our mouths do not run on gas and air alone, occasionally food and drink. So if you wouldn't mind contributing, no contribution, too large or too small. And this is the first time we're asking you. So you know what? You should feel a little guilty because we're just going to keep going, whether or not you help us out. Your gain, your loss.
The PayPal is paypal.me/TSD1975. That's paypal.me/TSD1975.
It would help. We're going to keep going. You know, we don't like to beg, and certainly we're not, but actually, it's a fucking command. Take it or leave it. Thank you. This is the Lydian Spin. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. What's up, buddy?
What's up? I mean, just every day is a new event. I'm kind of like getting ready. I go to Europe for the month in October, so I'm just preparing a lot for that. But besides that, it seems like the world is extremely dynamic. I have to fucking fly into Estonia, which just had a little Russian invasion a couple days ago.
Look, they tried to take down a Spanish flight with
Well, so I had to fly into Estonia where Russia hung out for 12 minutes, I guess, and NATO is scrambling. And then, but of course, there is no direct flight to Estonia from New York City, so I'm going via Copenhagen, which they shut down because of all these drones. So let's see what happens.
So many airport shutdowns in this country and there. It is. I'm glad I'm not flying to Europe until January.
Yes. And meanwhile,
what are you going to do? What you going to do?
I am. Well, I'll make it quick. I'm doing a solo performance in a church in Humau, this exotic island in the northern Baltic, an old ancient church. And then I'm going to be playing with some Estonian musicians. And then I have to give a workshop. And then I fly to Berlin, practice for a tour I'm doing with a bunch of great European musicians.
Fabulous. Love it.
It keeps on going. I'm back.
Well, that's grand. And then you come back, and then we go out for a little bit.
Then we go out for a little bit, and it just.
That's fantastic. And before that, I'll go out with Keckler for a few dates, and then after that, I'll go out with JT Aberset for a few dates.
So we'll see if if there's a NATO Russian war while I'm there, or do I stay there because there's a civil war going on here?
Well, okay.
Both could happen.
All right. Speaking of which,
yes.
You know, I occasionally like to rant because we hear so much bullshit. So I have to get this off my lovely chest.
Okay. I have some side stories, but I think the ball's in your court right now. The trajectory is this. Go for it.
Balls are in my court.
Yes.
I don't understand, and I don't think there is an explanation, how an ex-heroin addict who has no medical or public health qualifications, who admits that a worm ate his brain, which now I can't confirm if it was before or after he dumped a dead bear cub in Central Park, whose own cousin, Carolyn Kennedy, branded him a predator that has cheated his way through life. His nephew, Joe Kennedy, stated that RFK Jr. is a threat to the health of the well-being of every American. And most of his family calls for his resignation as he spews anti-scientific rhetoric. And in his latest act of lunacy, excuse me, there's too many to mention right now. To me, the only cure really for autism is not fucking breeding in the first place, or possibly having, as Mary Daly once said, a Mr.ectomy. Love that word. Author of Gynecology. Check it out. But back to the buffoonery. His butt buddy, Diaper Donnie Dementia, who sadly or hilariously, if you're me, if it wasn't so fucking tragic, seems to be suffering from, I mean, he always has, but it's more obvious than ever, malignant narcissism, antisocial personality disorder, megalomania, cognitive decline. But look, don't just take my word for it. This has been confirmed by over 200 health professionals who note his repeated lying, impulsivity, irresponsibility, lack of remorse as proof. Oh, but look, no biggie. Let me add to that. How about this? he's got body dysmorphia, because anyone that looks like that and brags about how good they look must be a little bit freaking nutsy. But okay, let's not mention
Deep
the
fried Mel
supposed.
Gibson is his new nickname. Deep fried Mel Gibson.
Let's not mention the supposed stench,
Oh,
which
oh,
which
God.
I kind of enough to make a
Steroids.
gag with.
You're right. Steroids are known. Yeah.
Well, which I hear smells of, according to Adam Kissinger, ketchup, makeup, armpit, and butt, according to the experts, which
Ugh.
if you've which the likes of which you've never smelled. Now, of course, there's just not enough time left on this planet to summarize all of his outlandishly obsolescent falsehoods and bogus theories, but he really laid it down at the UN the other day. Or just plain straight up freaking lies. I'm just going to mention a few because these are some of the best ones, I think. Bleach for COVID. Maybe he should use some on his underarms. Windmills causing cancer. There is no inflation. Groceries, which is a word he thinks he made up. He's never been to a fucking supermarket. Grocery prices are down. Gas prices are the lowest they've ever been. He's reducing prescription drug prices by 1,500%. Now, will somebody please give this clown a calculator? I mean, that can't reduce something by 1,500%.
Yeah.
This is a man, and I got to give it to him. Oh boy, would I like to fucking give it to him. That projectile vomits accusations at anyone who ruptures his fragile ego, can't control his bowels, spewing bile, which flows out of his blowhole like a tantrum throwing beached whale, whose every proclamation is filled with hateful rhetoric, quote, the likes of which we have never seen before, such as recent quote, right after somebody said they forgive in their Christianity. I hate my opponents and I don't want the best for them. Yeah, okay, right. Someone who so desperately wants to be liked that he buttered up the dictators who played him as a frickin' fool. If he didn't realize that yet, he is really sick.
Yep.
And then has the unmitigated nerve to rant and rave in front of 150 world leaders, proving just what a sad and vengeful, insecure would-be dictator his idiocracy has tainted his entire existence with, as he brags, with no obvious proof, that he has resolved 7 major conflicts, rewriting reality while, of course, offering no proof, and then demanding a Nobel Peace Prize, at least one for each of the wars he did not solve, for a job not freaking done. Dismisses climate change as a con job, when, by the way, if you've been following the news, the most devastating storm ever recorded on Earth has just hit Hong Kong. Winds of 150 miles an hour, 2 million people told to evacuate, created water swells higher than light posts. Oh, more to come, more to come. And then claimed, what an idiot, I'm surprised his hand didn't burn when he held the Bible upside down, that Christianity is the most persecuted religion on earth, as he attempts to persecute and prosecute anyone that disagrees with him, including the press, late night talk shows, because let's face it, being a fucking joke doesn't mean that you can take a fucking joke. I'm just saying. All right.
That is a good, that's a good one.
Well, it had to be said. Somebody had to say it. And by the way, whatever.
Well,
now.
So going back to RFK Jr. I mean, Dr. Oz standing next to him too. I mean,
a total charlatan. I mean, really.
Scientific method. The first step of the way when you have a result is, particularly that one that leads positive, whatever, is differentiating correlation from causation. So if you, their whole thing was based on the Swedish journal that showed a little bit of correlation.
And there was another Scandinavian, what is it called? A scientific investigation that interviewed 2.5 million people on funny, very little autism with or without.
Well, so the thing is, when they did see a little bit uptick, which was like one study out of gazillions, the next step is like, okay, let's now look at their siblings who weren't on Tylenol. Of course, it was genetic. They had higher, that equal autism. So I mean, it was killed immediately.
And 1 million different fucking pollutants in everything we breathe, eat, and exist.
That's where I was going to go with this. So if you are going to avoid the scientific method and you want to make human perception subjective pattern recognition, are you this unimaginative that you just want to be spoon-fed what the reason is? You can't consider microplastics. You can't consider forever chemicals, like
mercury, lead,
which are so much of us in the last 50 years. So now we have to investigate that. But you can't you dismiss all of that because
I don't
people
think
told you this is what you're supposed to think. It's so stupid.
I think things like Tylenol they're very bad for the liver. Let's start there. I mean, of course, they could give better drugs to take away, especially female pain, which happens to have a little more than half the population every month until they're about 50, instead of all these researchers making a better Viagra, which, by the way, women could use one because, face it, we have to fuck men, and that's not often pretty. I'm just saying.
So
to make hysterectomy.
so now let's talk about education. Another thing that's going down the tubes. And you thought it was bad before. The Oklahoma high schools are now going to put Charlie Kirk and his turning point, quote unquote, movement into the American history books. Which of course, Charlie Kirk was always dismissing Martin Luther King, thought he was a bad person, was against civil rights.
I was against women voting.
A lot of these things. But Martin Luther King was a people's movement. Turning Point wasn't. That was funded by billionaires. He was just a fucking puppet.
Well, and by the way, look, another false prophet. It just goes to prove people have a fucking god hole that needs to be filled because they can't accept the fact that their life might suck and they die and there's nothing after that.
I saw an interesting
your own fucking standing. And by the way, be grateful for what you have. And if you don't like what you have, try a little fucking harder. But let's face it, it's very hard right now, no matter what you do.
I saw someone bring up
1% of the population.
Less than. I saw someone bring up a good point. It's interesting about American white Christians. They seem to worship all types of characters except Jesus. I mean, all these icons are as
well, and if
180 degrees from Jesus.
If Jesus was, as I think he was, a gay-loving, possibly gay drug dealer that liked to hang around with hoes, I'd worship him too. But as George Carlin so succinctly said, Catholics worship a Jew who is nailed to a stick. That's George Carlin. I didn't say it. Just saying.
Well, Pastor Josh Akala, the one that was the loudest about the rapture that was supposed to happen yesterday and didn't.
Oh yeah. My rapture was masturbating, hoping it would end. Specifically in Washington, D.C., nothing happened. I guess I just got to try harder to jerk myself off.
Because he's because he likes to jerk off Trump so much, he's now trying to spin because everyone's like, well, what are the Epstein files? His new line is, God is delaying release of Epstein files.
Oh, please. Well, because if you want to blame the Epstein files on religion, we can just go back to the fucking witch hunts, Catholic pedophilia, and all sorts of other religious madness. As face it, God was the first cop. More wars are started out. Religion used to be the opium of the masses. Now it's the crack cocaine of assassins. That's my quote.
That's a good one. Well, yeah, there's now.
You can tell I'm a little bit heated. I'm humid and heated.
Well, speaking of humid and heated, Houston thinks it has a serial killing problem because they found 5 bodies in 5 days in the bayou, and but then
guy down the bayou.
Well,
Can you tell, Tim? I'm in a really good mood in spite of all this bullshit.
You are, considering how humid it is outside. Yes.
Well, whatever.
Well, so again, because the cops are saying there's no pattern we're seeing, blah blah blah. So pattern recognition, of course, the internet people are like, oh, there's a serial killer on the loose in Houston. Well, we will see. I mean, I'm sure there is.
Let me hang on a second. As a forensic freakophile, I have to say this. Okay, no one should be murdered. Okay, no one should do the murdering, but we focus on 5 people here. We focus on 2 people here. We focus on 1 person there. When every fucking day, hundreds of thousands of people are being starved out and murdered in wars across the world, 95 countries involved in conflict. And this goes back to, 1 death is a tragedy, 1 million a mere statistic. So this is the problem I have. And by the way, by the FBI statistic, 500 at least serial killing truck drivers, Long Haul, a great book by an ex-FBI agent. I'm just saying, murder, damn fool, monkey see, monkey do. And you wonder why people murder in this country, and there's a few reasons. If this country is a bully, only out of war for 10 years, whole world only out of war for 8% of the time. If it trickles down and police shoot people to death, then batter people, and then
today that guy shot the ice contained.
Disgruntled individuals feel also the need. I mean, I feel, look, take yourself out. You really don't need to take everybody out with you because, first of all, you're aiming in the wrong direction. Not that I'm one to say what the direction is, but it really, what does it solve? And you know what? There's too many examples now for anyone to be a fucking hero because they took 1 or 10 people out. It's just, it ain't going to happen. It's not what it once was.
Right. It's true. It's true. And people talk about, the Columbine, that was on the front page for a week. Now it's a school shooting is lucky. It
Every day.
makes the newspaper. You had this psycho who shot up the containment camp or holding zone of ICE.
When people have been reduced to feeling that there is no respect for their own life, how can they have respect for anybody else's life? And a lot of that is just either from neglect, from the bullish bullshit of this country endlessly dangling a carrot no one will ever be able to have a fucking bite of, or if it's just from just the cult of what America is. America was founded on killing people, false religious freedom, and obliterating the others. So what do you expect? This is what this country is, and anybody who thinks it's different doesn't know their fucking history. With that, I don't know what else to say. Fortunately, we have a historian of literature and music on this podcast who is an archivist and who at least draws solace and substance from people who use words and music in an attempt to salve, because we can't solve, the universal wound. So today we have Harlow Crandall. This is the Lydian Spin. And by the way, look, just donate. Come on, 322 episodes and you can't give us a fucking $1 each? I don't care, but it would help both me and Tim Dahl before we both go on a speaker strike. Although, of course, I'll never shut up. I'm just saying. PayPal, easy, done. Push, click. Thank you. This is the Lydian Spin with the Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and one of my favorite names I've ever heard in my life, Harlow Crandall, who approached me at a retrovirus gig in a church in Kentucky. Now, there's just no better meeting point than that. Hello, Harlow.
How are you doing?
Good to see you, Harlow.
Good to see you.
So Harlow approached me at the church. It's always welcome to my church, because he wanted to do, and I don't always agree to these things, but something about him, maybe was whatever about him, I decided because he was investigating the cross between no wave and literature. So I said, can we have a conversation? I said, well, of course we can. And then when we were first talking, Harlow, I'm like, well, why don't you send me some of your writing? And suddenly I'm like, wait a minute, honey bunny. Are you from my hometown of Rochester, New York? Because there were some clues in the poem. And you were, you little sneak.
Oh, yeah.
So Harlow has just released a new album called Better an Old Demon Than a New God, or Better a New God Than an Old Demon, which would be me, but I'm just saying. Which I have to say, it's so reminiscent of like good Stooges, New York, rock and roll, raunchy, but the lyrics, which, I'm a stickler for. And I have to say, I'm so happy I had a little inspiration in this record. Why don't you talk about that for a minute? Hello.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was one of those things. I hadn't written a song in 5 years, and Pete was kind of on me because I was having a rough time. I was dealing with my father has dementia. We were trying to place him into like a memory care facility, so it was Pete was pushing me along to write something, and I kind of got the first song together. I was like, well, maybe I'll send this to Lydia, and it was kind of that thing of like, okay, I should make this good. Then you were nice enough to send me a few titles off of your bookshelf that kind of kept shaping.
I suggested because first of all, literature is one of your main disciplines, and we're going to get into that. That, I mean, kind of like with the Harry Cruz group I did, naming songs after different books. I suggested you name songs after different books, and you did. And it really worked out fucking fantastic, because basically one of the things too that you did recently when you came to New York and you visited here is you got a grant to go and research the Jim Carroll Library.
Yeah. So they had his archives were at the New York Public Library, their rare book and manuscript division.
And what drew you to that? What was that? Was that part of your master scheme and your dissertation you're writing, or just what prompted that? And you got a grant for it, which is amazing.
Yeah, I'm doing a chapter on Jim Carroll in it because like one of the things is like I think that his he's one of those individuals that needs to be rediscovered. I think that there isn't a ton of work, but when you consider the Basketball Diaries, his album Catholic Boy, I think he put out a lot of really interesting stuff that was incredibly. I think the poetry is incredibly strong, and I think it's one of those.
And the song "This Is for the People Who Died." I mean, it's just one of the most devastating, rock songs because of the period where a lot of us knew so many people that were dying.
Oh yeah, and it's one of those things. It's an anthem, and it's one of those things where even back in Rochester, like a lot of like the music scene had a kind of a high fatality rate, and every time we lost somebody, that was the song that went onto the jukebox. It still plays that role, and so it was really kind of like it was special to be able to like work in his archives. They had materials from working notebooks and ephemera and computer files and et cetera from about 1980 until he passed away. And there's a lot of interesting stuff. There's a lot of material that he was working on that never came to fruition, that never made it into the public.
Yeah. And was that towards your dissertation or book that you're working on now? So was that part of your research into literature at that point, or
Yeah. So
what's going
basically,
to happen with all your knowledge about that? All your secret knowledge that none of us have because we haven't gone to the library.
well, are you kind of curious specifically in terms of like what there was with Jim Carroll's stuff, or just like the dissertation on the whole?
Yeah, the dissertation on the whole.
Okay, so like
Been
one of
working
the
on
things I'm
that for a while. We'll go back and forth on this, but so the reason you interviewed me and also
yeah.
Tim Dahl and whoever else you'll tell us is because you're working on this dissertation.
Yeah, and so the dissertation deals specifically with the sort of like literary impulses of New York punk and no wave, and the way in which this sort of interacted with the development of the actual subculture. And one of the things I'm really interested in is how people were looking to the past, whether that was the wreckage of like 1960s kind of anti-authoritarian rock and roll, like stuff like the Velvet Underground or the Stooges, and these things that sort of resisted the hippie ideal and sort of taking bits and pieces of that and recombining it with these sort of different threads from literature, and especially like looking at and then also the sort of longer term trajectory of like as like the Sex Pistols happen, everyone in New York, there's a response to it, and then as like
You know what my response was? So fucking what?
exactly, and that's
Bad
like
rock and roll played twice as fast. Good lyrics. All right, whatever. Go ahead.
so and then
I'm a no
also
wave snob. You know it.
100%. And like, so I'm also curious about how like the sort of long-term trajectory of how the subcultures sort of like the ebb and flows of these different subcultures, but also like the rise of like hip hop, spoken word, the way in which these different things kind of impacted careers on across the board. And I think that and I think it's really especially interesting in terms of no wave because like to me, in many respects, like your career kind of, yeah, and your career kind of fulfills a lot of the promise that a lot of other people never made it around to. You actually became so that promise of some of these ideas becoming like an international, like actual movement.
An international aggravant. Well, I mean, my first intention was spoken word. I just had to do music to get to that. But yeah, thank you very much about that.
I mean, I'm curious. I mean, your thesis. I mean, you're intertwining basically these kind of, well, I've talked about this when you interview, like different philosophies. What about the idea, and you probably touch on this, I mean, there's a lot of musicians out there who are illiterate, and but a zeitgeist, a philosophy, whether it was in literature, just coming to the same arrival points from completely different worlds because of just other elements of human connection beyond understanding how to listen to a certain type of music, or even having the skill just to read, period. So
Tim, that's a good question, because I think that it involves my generation more so, because we did read. We didn't have the internet. We read books. We recommended
Right.
books. So and that did influence or not our music, but we read a lot of books. People of my
Right,
generation.
but and I have no idea how many books James Chance read, but I mean, you told me he didn't know how to
Even
brush his teeth when you met him. So maybe he was literate. I don't know. It's interesting when somebody when a spirit and when a general a general attitude, if you will, is
Well, who
kind of
else,
this
Harlow,
collective.
did you talk to in your and this coming monster piece that you've been working on? Who else did you interview for this?
Oh, so I've done there's been a few. So I was well lucky enough. I was lucky that you helped me out and to establish a connection with Thurston Moore. He provided a really wonderful interview for your chapter. I interviewed Tim, obviously, but I also had a really great chance to speak to Lenny Kaye, who was in the Patti Smith group, and also record. He also played guitar on Jim Carroll's third record, and also worked with him a little bit during like kind of these like two-person sort of mini tours down the West
Yeah.
Coast and stuff like
Well, and
that.
Lenny Kaye was the only man when I first got to New York who would listen to my poetry, and I still thank him for that. And I did get to perform with him once with, it's a very low key thing with a few other people, but he was the only one that didn't run away from me, so I had to thank him from that.
That's really cool. He
And
seems
it's great that he talked to you, so he talked to you, and that's great.
yeah. And it was one of those things, like especially for like somebody's career like Jim Carroll, like it's really trying to piece together something out of just the very few fragments. Like there's no biography, there's not really any like comprehensive memoir. So it's one of those things where it's difficult to do. And that so those types of things were really important. I also had the opportunity to interview Michael Wolff, who was the publisher of the first publisher for the Basketball Diaries, and he had a lot of really great information too, and just to see how that kind of came together. And
When did that book come out first? When did Basketball Diaries come out?
it came out on Timbuktu Press in 1978, and it's like really kind of interesting because like Jim Carroll, because like the manuscript had been kind of kicking around at least since the late 60s. And at least in terms of how Jim Carroll talked about it, it was kind of one of those things where everyone kind of read it as being camp. And then when punk happened, he described it as being the right time to publish it.
So when did
And
Jim Carroll even start like doing poetry before he started doing music? Or what is that? I mean, if you say it was kicking around since the late 60s, I didn't realize that.
he published his first collection. He self-published a collection called Organic Trains while he was still in high school, and he used that to meet Ted Berrigan and Ann Waldman. From the story that I've heard, or from what I've been able to put together, it sounds like Ann Waldman actually typed up the first. She transcribed and typed the Basketball Diaries manuscript initially. From what I might this might be inaccurate
Well, and
information.
Ann Waldman, who started the St. Mark's Poetry Project with Burroughs and Ginsberg and the Naropa Institute, which I just came from teaching, I taught it twice, and who's still an incredible hardcore poet and still performing and still radical. Have you talked to her for your dissertation?
I have not had the opportunity yet.
Do you want to?
That would be incredible.
Might be able to arrange it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because
she's very open. I mean, she's so important in the scope of history and the continuation.
I know, and she's an incredible writer too. I mean, some of the stuff that she's done is just mind blowing,
and still does. Right. So Jim Carroll. So Ann Waldman might have typed up his. So this is the late 60s. Was he in New York then, or where was he?
He was in New York. I mean, like he grew up in New York, and then he only moved out to California by the end of it was probably early 1974. So it's kind of this really interesting thing with his career because he was associated with Patti Smith really early on,
right.
And he was he was like a figure at St. Mark's. He was
everyone loved him. People loved him.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Ted Berrigan spoke about him as being kind of this like rock and roll poet, like this like idea that somebody could do to poetry, could have the effect of poetry with like what rock and roll, like the impact that rock and roll had in popular culture. And but by like 74, he had a lot of like just due to drugs and etc. He kind of escaped out to Bolinas, California, and kind of reorganized his life out there.
Did he record his album in California? Did he start recording music then?
The band didn't start up until about I might some of the information dates is tough to put together, but I
Of
think it
course.
might be around 78 that the band
Yeah.
really starts. And the band existed for a while too. Like they were a well-regarded local bar band that didn't that from the sounds of it didn't have direction until they got paired up with him.
Got it. All right. So now so let's go back in time a little bit. So you're in Rochester as a teenager, much
Yes.
after my time. Strange that we both were there. And what were you doing? You're a teenager. When did you start doing music? What were you into? Because, again, it's interesting when people have different generations. Like, I'm always amazed when people who are much younger do go into literature as opposed to 140 characters on a fucking website or whatever. What happened to you as a child, Harlow? What got you into all this shit?
What screwed me up? The
Well, actually, what straightened you
I'm
out?
joking. So in terms of so I actually really resisted doing anything creative. My mom is a really great artist, and I feel like, growing up there was kind of, people sort of just expected I would follow this in her footsteps, sort of. And I think that, like, for a long time I just resisted doing any creative work. And then by high school, I didn't really have a lot of I didn't think much of music. I didn't think it really served any point, and I wasn't really very attracted
I like
to
that. Didn't really serve any point. Well, is that because you were into literature, or you're just like anti everything?
I was just kind of anti everything, I think, at that
Have a
point.
feel. I wonder how that happened. Yeah, hello.
And then it was that thing of being and honestly, the thing that turned me on to music was hearing Bob Dylan, because it was that moment like, oh, a song can actually be about something. It can actually make a statement. And that kind of got me kind of interested. And I think one of the things that's sort of funny is that probably a lot of the stuff I was listening to in high school wasn't all that different than people from your generation, because I was listening to a lot of like The Who, Led Zeppelin, the classic rock kind of staples, along with Bob Dylan. But then I discovered the Velvet Underground, and that kind of, and
That
the
changed
Stooges,
everything.
and that also opened up the door to, like, Warhol and all of that stuff. I was really more invested in being a visual artist by the end of high school. It was like that was something I got really into. But then my freshman year of college, I there wasn't there I didn't have enough to put a portfolio together to be an art major. So music and writing was something I could do in my dorm room, and I pretty much failed out of Fredonia because I was trying to teach myself how to write. I wanted to know how did a song work? How can you write lyrics? And fortunately, when my first band formed, I was like, my bass player introduced me to William Burroughs' novel Naked Lunch, and that was the first time I came across something where I was like, oh, this is literature is art. Like, this is actually art. This isn't
There's
disconnected
really
from.
no restrictions if you have a vision to create something with words. The same
Yeah.
way there is no restrictions if you have a vision to create something with music. It's just literature seems from the outside more restrictive because most
Well,
books are.
it's interesting when you say that, because just like the subject of English in college or music theory. Now, these are great things to study. They actually provide a lot of tools. However, what the misconception is that it starts with theory and then the music happens. No, theory is explaining to the music that was written. You know, studying language and literature, you're studying the books that were written. Not that these, everything's feeding off each other, springing off each other. But yes, as you were both saying, these things are art before they're dissected.
Yeah, 100%. I think it was and it was an important realization to me, because, like, I guess to give you context, I got stuck going to like an all dude Catholic high school, and basically, like, how English was taught, it was really just that thing of like, search for the Jesus illusion, and in like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and that's no way to
Until
read
you
a book.
found teenage Jesus and then you realized where the real church was.
Exactly.
Why'd you go to a Catholic school? Because you were raised in a religious family, or because you were a bad boy and that was the last resort? It's
I
usually
think
one or the other, right?
yeah, and unfortunately, it's neither. Is I think my dad was kind of growing up, he was kind of the bad boy, and I think that he really valued
Ah,
education, and I think that he just
okay.
he just thought it provide more options for me later in life, but it was still a very strange. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
Trust, neither would
Did you have like
I.
nuns hitting
But
you
you
and stuff?
what, Tim?
Did
What?
you have like nuns hitting you with like rulers, or what is it? Or it was kind of bad for that generation?
It was no nuns, just the priests. They were the
Oh
yeah.
boy. You could
Nonetheless,
volunteer that if you want.
you did go to college and you did focus on creative writing. You did get an FFA from Queen's University in
Yeah,
Charlotte.
yeah, yeah. It
Because
was a low
then you've
residency.
said, okay, that's where I have to go. But let's go back to starting music in Rochester. So what? You pick up a guitar, like, yeah, you have no interest in music, then you do. You pick up a guitar, then what?
No, I mean, in terms of that stuff, I mean, like, everything was, fortunately, some things like with my first band, A Televised Reality, it was just kind of like a project that started in our dorm room. And then then at the time, like, Alex Northrup was one of the players in that band. And we just recorded everything in his basement. It came out okay for what that was. But a lot of the time after that in Rochester was like, I feel like Rochester's a weird city to grow up
Certainly
playing.
is.
It's a weird city. I mean, like, and it's a difficult place to play music because one thing that's amazing is that it has there is this, it has this history going back to the early 80s with like sort of garage rock revival. It's always had this
Well,
sort
it
of
has the house of guitars.
Oh,
yeah,
I mean, earlier. In terms of just Rust Belt rock. I mean, that's been it was a big rock town all throughout the
Yeah, but let's
'70s
go
and
back to the
late
early
'60s.
70s when I was an adolescent and teenager. Every fucking amazing band came through there. But I don't know of any
Yeah,
bands that were from there at that point, but everybody came through there. I was lucky to be there then at that point,
yeah,
you know.
no,
yeah.
100%.
It's weird because it's and I'm from the outside. It's like depressed. It feels like there's limited resources, yet there are resources. Like you had Eastman School of Music, so you had actually real music educators there, but then you just don't
That's
feel
not for
that when
us.
you're out there, right? Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but no, but there's not really an industry there, so it's in terms of music. So the resources are there to learn about it, but it's not a live and healthy living organism of that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
Am I
I
so
mean,
wrong?
let's
Or
just go ahead, Harlow.
well, I think like one of the things is like that there is like one of the things is that there is like the house guitars, the record archive. There are these sort of like institutions there, like the Bug Jar has been around forever at this point. And like so I think that the one good thing is that there always has sort of been a scene, and that scene has really leaned towards like alternative and punk. And there's also a really good noise scene. I was involved in the noise scene there for a good chunk in my early 20s. And like so there is this sort of
Right.
alternative type thing, but there is a really weird divide in that city between art and punk. Like there's
Everything, well, by everything. There's a weird divide of everything.
that, and like so it's one of those it's a place that's kind of hard to. For what I was doing, I feel like it was hard to gain much of an audience. It was, I mean, I'm very
So
thankful.
exactly. So when did you decide? Okay, first of all, you're going to do the music, but creative writing is the essence, and then also you get into teaching, which we're going to get into that in a minute because I attended one of your classes. So you go to college, you get whatever you got to get, and then how did you get to Charlotte?
So I did that as a low residency program. So it was one of those deals where you go down, you're on campus for like a week a semester, and then the rest is remote. So I didn't have to completely interrupt my life to do it, and it was really important for me to, because all my friends were in Rochester, my band was in Rochester, so I was kind of like working on my MFA at the same time that my band was like working towards their first like at the time New City Slang was working towards our debut record.
And New
in
City
20
Slang is the name of what you record under then and now.
Yeah, that's correct.
We're going to talk about your new record in a minute too. So, well, that's an amazing thing that you can go down for a week and come back up and have your life.
Yeah, and like so that was like so that was important to me, and it was like one of those things like I do take poetry like really seriously. I do think though that lyrics and poetry are very different organisms in general. I think that there's but the
It's a
but
good that's a good point because I real quick question. So what did you think about the idea of Bob Dylan winning the poetry Pulitzer Prize. You think that was kind of absurd? Because he's a lyricist for songs, and if you differentiate the two, what do you think about that?
Well, I think the thing is that the problem is that we should be asking about the notion of are there lyrics that are of a literary quality?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
and
Hear
I
you.
think
Yes, there
I think
are.
that
And by the way, we're going to have you read some of your lyrics, or I'm going to read them. They are of literary quality.
Well, sure they can be, but there's also a point sometimes with lyrics. There is a musical quality to some of them in terms of just how the word sounds at that point in the song, and so you're making decisions sometimes that are considering something else than just pure literature. I
yeah.
find it. It's like,
Oh, totally. I mean, and it's all in the vowels, it's all in the pronunciation and the and
yeah,
the
yeah.
inflection is. And I think that like to me, I think it's great that he won it because I think it was like one of those things where because if who else? I mean, that's the thing. Like who else would hit that point?
Well,
And
and let's
maybe
face it takes you 50 years at least, if not 500, to get recognized for what you do. So it's about time for me, at least. I'm just saying. Which, by the way, Harlow
500.
Crandall, best name ever. On our meeting in the church in Kentucky, and of course, I asked you, like I asked Sebastian Greppo, who's recording this for us, can you give me a gig? And you said, I'll look into it. But you didn't just get me a gig. You actually talked to your professor because you were teaching at that time at Middle State University of Tennessee, and your professor wrote to me and then said, "Well, we can do a gig, but we'd like to offer you a fellowship." And I'm like, "Well, the hell does that mean?" You know, very little except for a placard, a couple of thou, come down and talk. Okay, fine. But when he said only two other people had gotten it, which was Lamont Dozier, who wrote a lot of Motown, and Barry Gibbs, and I hate the fucking Bee Gees. And he goes, I didn't give it to Barry Gibbs. I'm like, I accept. And so I came down and I
What an
attended one
eclectic
of
trio.
I wrote more songs than both of them combined. It doesn't matter. Nobody cares. But when I went down to your class, it was very strange because this really showed me, and I think this is what stopped you from teaching and made you focus on other things. All the students in your class had COVID brain. Like I would ask a question, it would be a blank stare. I would ask, well, what kind of music do you like? Even they didn't know. This was like right past COVID brain. But there was also a punk rock class at the university, and everything that went there was pretty lively. I'm like, I guess punk rock saved him. I'm not so sure. So what caused you, or how did you get into teaching a class? And what was your first class that you were teaching in Tennessee? And then you're in Tennessee. Which, by the way, I love Tennessee.
So like the thing was like I applied to the doctor program as kind of a last ditch effort to get out of Rochester. The thing was I was working at the University of Rochester doing like medical image scanning, and basically meant I was like pulling like staples out of paper for 4 hours every day, and I was losing my. I did that for like a year, and I was done. I was like, okay, I guess I'll apply to
brain death. Yeah, brain
and,
death.
my hope was to get an assistantship, which meant that I taught and it covered my coursework, and I wanted the work experience of teaching at that period of time. So I started in 2019 and went through the whole pandemic and everything. I started off with expository writing, just like basic introduction, like intro to college writing type stuff, research and argumentative writing. But then I also was lucky enough to teach a couple literature courses, including a beat literature course, which was my favorite.
Which is, excuse me, very important that you were able to teach a beat literature course. And also it's at the university that has the largest compilation archive of American music.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Which you're now working in the archives of.
Yeah.
Because teaching zombies is really hard work.
Well, I think it was one of those things. It was a tough moment because everyone, no one had been in a classroom or really interacting for so long, and it was brutal.
Yeah.
And then
I was shocked. I have to say, having taught workshops and communicating with people, I saw the effect of COVID brain on youth, and it was terrifying because they couldn't answer a single question. So they're sitting there, they're like watching a blank screen, no matter what you're presenting to them. No wonder you didn't last. No wonder you said, okay, that's enough.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things I might go back to. I mean, the reality is that like I really had to step aside because I had to get my father play. I think we delayed getting my father into like a memory care facility because of the pandemic, and then it was that, and things hit a point where it was one crisis after another, and I couldn't uphold my end of teaching and being present, and it was just that time where I was like, I need to step aside because this is going to the shit's going to hit the fan, and it did. So it's one of those things I might go back to. I mean, I'm glad I'm working at the Center for Popular Music now because it affords me a lot more flexibility to provide to drive out to North Carolina and help out my family when they need it. But
Well,
it's
and let me just ask you this because a lot of people are going to be facing this. I mean, we're facing it with the fucking president of this country, dementia. And I mean, it's got to be kind of terrifying because we don't really know exactly what causes it. We don't know how transmissible genetically it is. Let's hope it skips a generation. And we don't know why it hits or how it hits and how hard it hits so quickly. It's terrifying, actually.
Yeah, it is. And I think one of the things that's really terrible is our society tends to dehumanize anyone that struggles, that's like being impacted by this. It's kind of like it's like very Kafka-esque almost. It's like that thing, it's like the metamorphosis. It's like no one is actually pissed off over no one's pissed off over the fact that or concerned that he woke up as a giant bug. They're only concerned over the fact that he can't go to work anymore. And that's kind of like one of the things that's a brutal reality dealing with some of these declines where people are no longer able to fulfill an expected role. And I
Well,
don't
and
and
what's
I
interesting is right now with all the talk, and this is going to be part of the intro, with all the talk about autism, which some people with autism, because it's so diverse what it is, are actually incredible geniuses. But dementia can turn a genius into an idiot. Of course, right now, managing this country had turned an idiot into a bigger idiot. So, because very mysterious, just saying. Uh, let's go on because we're going to keep our mental mindset very acute.
Well,
So I just
but
want
the thing is though,
Tim.
well, you think we've moved beyond that, and yet there is also a long history of it. I mean, Inuits, quote unquote Eskimos, as the used to be called. Is classic. Like if you couldn't keep up with the nomads, see ya, you're drifting away on an iceberg. My friend, whose mom grew up in Naples, a village outside of Naples, Italy, and up until when she was growing up, if grandpa or the uncle couldn't keep up, they would make the young boys go on a little hunting trip up the mountain and come back, and he wouldn't be there with them anymore. So we thought we've moved beyond that, but I think we're still there.
All right. Well, I'm going to move beyond, and I'm gonna read one of Harlow's lyrics called "Close to the Knives," which is based on David Wojnarowicz, who was my absolute artistic hero and literary hero. And again, I'm so happy that I could slightly inspire Harlow to just go, look, I love your writing. So you're writing music, just put a title of a book off the shelf and go ahead. So I'm going to read these lyrics, Harlow, if you don't mind. And it's about David Wojnarowicz, and it sums him up beautifully. And it's called Close to the Knives. And we'll also put the link to these great, very, very post Stooges rock and roll songs. So inside his eyes burned the last days of Rome. At the waterfront pocket full of tenderloin, night paid his rent, put the moon out of focus. Only insurance is death that comes in small doses. I don't mind if your love is a crime, outside of everything and out of time. Every day leaves you further behind. What kills us keeps us alive. Take my life and keep it close to the knives. By the way, Close to the Knives is the title of a great Wojnarowicz book. Like Rambo in New York, lost inside a stuttering lay, the alphabet cops don't care if you keep out of sight. Is a backwater city, dope comes brown and dirty. Half your friends are dead, the rest won't make it to 30. That's very Jim Carroll, by the way. The lost desert in this diary of Dakota frames the buffalo black into the sky, unshackled from cliffs in upper Arizona. They're that feeling you might find that keeps you close, close to the knives. There are others, but I think all the lyrics are so great, Harlow, and they're such just a pageantry of beauty to those that have already passed that actually inspired both of us because literature is what inspired me to even do music because I had to do music in order to get the literature out. And back to what we were saying about poetry, which is a word I do not like, and lyrics, which I do write. I am right now compiling a book of, so I don't, it's not poetry. I'm only calling it that to be a dick.
Why do you hate the word
lyrics,
poetry?
Because most poetry sucks.
Okay.
It's an insult.
I guess, yeah.
It's an insult. And plus, I mean, it's just, mine are more like horrific, memorific thoughts put in a condensed form of prose. Okay, call it what you will. That's all I'm saying. So now you're working. You're working in the archives. So, Harlow, you're working in the largest archive of American music in the country or world. What's your job there, other than talking to me at this hour, which I like? What you actually doing there?
So right now, like when I started there, they were basically, they were nice enough to sort of take me on and sort of like create a situation that worked for me, given like all the stuff going on with my family. And so like at the very beginning, like a lot of it was like a lot of it has been like just like work in the back, like prepping. Like one of the things we're getting is the Maximum Rock and Roll collection. There's a couple news articles that came out recently about that. The materials haven't arrived.
Which is basically all the stuff that was sent to Maximum Rock and Roll that may or may not have ever come out, right?
I think that's my basic understanding of it. Don't quote me on it.
That's cool. I mean, that's amazing.
But we have like the entire run of Maximum Rock and Roll, so it's gonna be like one of those things, especially given how rare some of that stuff is, and given the given the DIY nature of so much of this stuff and so much of this particular culture. But it's like, so some of it was just like getting that stuff getting things set in the back for that. Other things too has been like working on just like cataloging, because we have like there's like 250,000 sound recordings, and we have a massive collection.
I guess you'll have a job for this and another lifetime. Don't work too fast. Just milk that shit. Don't work too fast on that. 250,000. And is there any kind of organizational design already, or is it your job to actually put it in order? I'm sorry, I'm laughing. It's tedious and horrible, but must be done.
Oh, so it's already, most of it's already essentially ordered, but it's they did it by label and catalog number. So it's one of those things
They
where
did what?
So you did it by label alphabetically, and by catalog number. So that way, like, because otherwise, if you do it by like artist or whatever, if your entire system goes down, you're going to have problems. Like if you like, at least now there's an external reference point where you can be like, oh, the label put out this record under this issue number.
And how far back in musical history does this archive go?
The materials that the Center for Popular Music at Middle Tennessee State University, the materials that they have there actually go back to the Revolutionary War. I mean, there actually are like some really rare artifacts.
And that's mainly because, well, I guess you're close enough to Nashville, and Nashville being the music hub it is because of sheet music, right? And player piano scrolls and stuff like this. So
yeah, and
recording came later, and you said, yeah, all the printing presses were there.
Yeah, I mean, like,
so did files actually compile? Does the archive compile like the sheet music, the live record, the recordings, the records? What is actually in? What is the physical reality of the archives?
It's a pretty big mix of stuff. So you do have because we have quite a few periodicals. That was great for my work, because there's a bunch of like New York rockers, not the full run, but there's a chunk of that stuff. But so you have like the range of periodicals. There are then you also have individual sort of like they have manuscript collections. So like, let's say like John Hartford, we have like all of John Hartford's stuff basically. So it's like including like a lot of his home recordings, things like that. So you have the manuscript collections. There's quite a few. I know that there's a good amount of hymnals and things along those lines. Then there's
I believe that.
LP. Then there's like the LPs, and we have everything from like 78s onward.
Sure.
Divide by 250,000. Divide by 250,000. Amazing.
Do you have a big Stephen Foster collection?
I I don't know in terms of exactly what we own, but there's a lot of Stephen Foster LPs. I mean,
I
there's
could
just a lot.
imagine.
And
I
like,
could
so
imagine. Yeah.
a lot of it right now, like there isn't, things aren't cataloged or weren't cataloged properly. So I'm kind of starting at the beginning and kind of sorting.
You will
Things are,
always have a job. You better get a raise every 2 months. And I'm gonna write to Greg, the professor, before I'm gonna say it's time for a raise every 2 months.
What about the cylinder vinyls for do you have a bunch of those?
yeah, I would have to like that. That'd be a question for Martin. Martin is kind of
Okay.
like he's like the head sound guy there, and he's also one of the only people in the country that can actually record onto that. Like he knows how to do that. I mean, he does that.
Okay. Yeah,
It's like,
what's a cylinder vinyl lathe looks like? Look, I have no idea. I mean,
it's really interesting. I had the opportunity to watch him do it for a class one time. It's really
really,
fascinating. Yeah, yeah.
I would
So
say
he's
so.
one
Yeah,
of
I'd be curious
one
to
of
see
the
that.
there's like I think one family that's still manufacturing them.
So,
For
Harlow, I have
what
to bring in
reason?
with this because, okay, go ahead, Tim. For what reason?
No, no, for what reason? I mean, well, you have like a few, I don't know, cyberpunk guys with handlebar mustache who have like a gramophone, and I need a new one of these. I mean, it's funny. I guess people collect these things, but like,
I mean, I think it's like one of those things when you talk about like material culture, something that we've really been moving out of. I
sure,
think
sure,
the
that's fine.
physicality of it, the
It's
limitation
fetishized.
of it,
Yes,
and like you don't really, and sometimes you just don't really know how it works until you're actually like using it and
fair.
doing it. And I think that's to me that I think is something worth kind of trying to save as much of as possible.
Now, Harlow, I have to because I was just thinking about this the other day. So we met in a church. You got me, helped get my fellowship. And then Tim Dahl and I went down to get it. And then you kindly, we enlisted you to be our driver on a few shows throughout Tennessee. And I have to tell one of my favorite stories. There are two concerning our drive. I don't remember exactly where, but we had to stop. We stopped to get a drink at some, like, a soft drink at some small store. I walk in. The guy is strapped with a holy metal shirt with like a skull on it or something. And I go, I don't know. I'm just flirting with him. Like, are you always strapped? He goes, yeah. I go, yeah, me too, usually. And we start talking. He goes, I got to show you something. I got to show you something. This is the middle of nowhere on our way to our Airbnb somewhere in Tennessee. So
That night was interesting too.
We're going to get to it. He locks the store up. People waiting outside to get in. He takes me to his truck and he shows me a bunch of baby gas masks, thinking, and of course, I did take delight. All right. So we hightail out of there because we're going to go to the Airbnb, which happens to be a trailer on a graveyard.
Yes.
On our way to the next gig, I walk into the trailer and I hear hello in the bathroom. Now, I've only heard another quote unquote ghost in another bathroom, which would have been the Chelsea Hotel, where I heard a ghost fart. Okay, back to the trailer. So that night, you and Tim Dahl are out on the closed-in porch.
We're enjoying talking music, enjoying a whiskey,
having a cocktail or two. But I'm watching one of my favorite, Evan Peters as Dahmer, while eating ribs. And when it comes to the scene where he asks a man who's beside him on the bed, are you more frightened of horror film? I'm paraphrasing, horror films or me? And the guy goes, I don't know. And Dahmer, Evan Peters, goes, let me feel your heart. And the guy goes, why? And he goes, because I'm going to eat it. So at that point, I stopped the film and I run to the window with a knife, maybe a rib in my hand, and I start knocking. And of course, you and Tim just thought I was totally insane.
Well, no, because it was more. I'll paint a better picture of that because
go ahead,
you got
Tim.
so excited. Well, you got so excited. Sort of like
I was so excited.
Like a little kid with a new toy or something, just kind of running around the place. We're just drinking whiskey, talking about music, and then every few seconds, like you just see creeping up from the window sill a pair of eyes and a tip of a knife looking at through the window, and then kind of disappear again. And then like 10 minutes later, like coming out the side a little bit, like there's the knife and eyes again, and kind of broke back.
It was a favorite. It was a favorite knife night of mine, I must say.
God.
What could be better than a trailer on a graveyard watching Dahmer with two of my favorite guys? It was fun.
No, but talk about the baby gas mask again. They were for what purpose? Like
He did not
World
have a
War
purpose
II.
in mind. He was just
Oh,
collecting
God.
baby gas masks, I guess, for the coming apocalypse, which you asked me we're already in, but whatever.
Yeah, I think he was just a collector.
Yeah,
Just
He was
like
a
another
collector, and
collector.
he could
Oh,
have collected all of us. I know.
speaking of the cylinder vinyl gramophones, I painted a picture about a cyberpunk. I meant a steampunk, like a guy with a monocle and handlebar mustaches, like wanting to make new cylinder vinyls and listen to it mono through a gramophone. I'd go
Hey, I
in
have
there just to witness that situation, but I don't know if I'd want that.
I
Anyhow,
have a
but
question
that's still
for Harlow, if I may,
Oh,
about his
yeah, please come
PhD.
on, Sebastian. Grappo, step in.
Don't want to hijack the podcast.
You certainly can.
No, I was wondering, Harlow, you've been collecting all this information, going to archives, reading interviews, interviewing people. So I suppose you now know more than most of us about this period. Do you have this problem of most PhD students or people who write PhDs to suddenly ask themselves, okay, I have so much information now. What am I trying to demonstrate? What am I trying to prove? Do you have like a title for your PhD? Are you getting this sort of PhD student fear? Why am I doing this? What am I set to do right now? What am I going to do with all this?
Great
I,
questions.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, I think that it's impossible to do this and not have doubts at points and sort of like wonder, like, what the hell am I doing here? Like, because it's very easy to have that kind of like imposter syndrome type thing. But I mean, fundamentally, I'm doing it because I want to. This is like, I mean, like for me, like all this stuff was like very important, and like it's like one of those things. Like, I mean, all going back to like, I mean, I remember the first time I picked up a copy of like No New York, and like it was like that thing like I was like, then me and all my friends being like at the time like being funny, like listening to putting it on in our dorm room and try and be like, okay, what is this, like this is this is different, this is something new, like because we all kind of had a sense of these things, and like all this like and I think one of the things, I guess the reason why punk, no wave, and these different literary and musical and art and visual art kind of cultural outcroppings are so important was because it was something that said there's an alternative. You don't have to become whatever society is telling you. There is an
Whatever
alternative.
came before. Right.
And so I think the dissertation is just kind of I guess fundamentally it's just an extension of that. I mean, maybe it's validation of of a very peculiar path,
Fetish.
but
You have.
and
Harlow, let me just say this: eliminate the imposter syndrome, because you know what, you're not. And second of all, this shit is important, and I think you have a perspective on it that nobody else maybe cared to, because really you're tackling a quite large subject that you are reading into it because you understand it, whether or not the cultural impact is completely recognized. It had an individual impact on a lot of people. And that's why I keep going. It's about the individual impact. And that's why it's important. Of course, I've never suffered imposter. The only imposter syndrome I have is when I see other people trying to copy my hairdo. I'm just saying, whatever, get a grip. But it's important because you are really pulling together all these semi-united yet disparate concepts that had an underlying belief that an alternative needs to exist and they're going to provide it, whether anybody liked it or not. And that's the point. Sorry for answering your question, but that's to me why you do it.
No,
or why
totally.
you're doing it, and why I'm very happy you are doing it.
Yeah, I think it's like one of those points. It was an incredibly like one of the things that's like so fascinating is like the unification of these sort of disparate cultural things that were going on into something that suddenly because you think about whether it was literature, film, music, there was all these different underground things, and suddenly it kind of took form and like had this greater purpose and like a more coherent philosophy that's so left open for a period of time a lot of room for kind of nonconformist thought and art. Like, I mean, punk eventually becomes kind of weird and conservative as it
pretty
gets
quickly.
Yeah. But I mean,
what period are you covering, Harlow? What period are you focusing on in this dissertation, which would, I think, become a book that has to be released? So,
yeah,
what period are you mainly focusing on? What
so
years?
I'm trying. So each chapter, I'm trying to really break into And like the thing that I like about your chapter, that I'm just getting things organized right now, but yours kind of breaks a little bit of the mold. But like what I'm kind of looking at is like sort of
I
like
mean, I
pre
break the mold. Please, of course I do. Thank you.
parts. And that's like that's why yours is going to be the most fun to write, I think. And it's like
Or
that thing where
difficult. Go ahead.
but it's like one of those things where you look at like somebody's activity before punk, during punk, and after. And somebody like Jim Carroll, for instance, you get that kind of perspective of like, he puts out Living at the Movies, before that. Like, so you have like him like releasing a full book of poetry. And like it kind of doesn't really have a big impact in a lot of respects. I mean,
At the
it got
moment, it didn't. Right.
yeah,
At the
and,
moment.
but then punk happens, and he basically is able to redefine himself and kind of fit into, because it's some it's like one of those things where like he talked about it. He was like, the Basketball Diaries wasn't a hippie book. He didn't really find himself attracted to the 60s counterculture. He was like a kind of a tough New York street kid in some respects, and or at least that's how he liked to like kind of
Well, and he
position himself.
was. Yeah.
And so when punk happens, it resonates. It's something that then now gives form to and context to the work. And it's like that thing where like it moves it from being camp to being like a serious statement. And I think that that's like one of those things that this sort of cultural moment in the 70s allowed a lot of things to be redefined and people to find a way to communicate to reach people and communicate in a way that they never would have been able to otherwise.
And I think the opposite of what is happening now for the most part culturally, or should I say anti-culturally, is that so much bullshit that you see online is based on liking over non-content. Like you have no content, but you have a million likes because you're just an empty vessel of bullshit, which so many people are. Whereas if you're going back to the period you're describing, we did not care. We knew we had to do what we were doing for us and maybe a handful of others. And even if not, because there's always weirdos, that it just had to be done. And it wasn't done to be liked. And it wasn't done. It was done, and that it's there and it's documented. And that again, you are consolidating this concept of the individual crying out at the time, especially, or at all times, where culture is a vacuum, where politics suck, where people are nihilistic only because what appears to not be really is truly far more fucking nihilistic. So, in comparison, we're actually optimistic because the end is near but not near enough, or there is hope enough for us. That's Kafka. I didn't write it. But that's what makes it important, is because people didn't give a shit about who liked it. They had to do it because if they didn't, their blood would be boiling and they would have died even sooner than what they fucking did.
Yeah, I think that when you look at what people were doing from like 73 to like about 78, 80, like the diversity of music and thought is incredible. And it's incredible, especially given the fact that it all feels like strangely cohesive too. I mean, that's the other thing. It feels strangely culturally cohesive.
Even if it didn't sound anything alike, there was some weird cohesion. And basically, it was because we were all disappointed in the failure of the 60s. America was, as it always has been, in a shithole. And emotionally, we were all pretty much fucked up by family, or even the bigger family, which would be the father of this country, or God, the fucking father. And therefore, we're not going to be quiet about it.
Yeah. And I think that that's like one of those things. It's like, I mean, that's why I feel as though it's like so important right now to like sort of like look to return to this and to look at this, because like I've never like even like artistically for myself, with my songwriting and music, I've never considered anything I do to be like a retro or revival kind of thing, because I don't think I don't like retro revival bands. But
well, let me just say this: your music is so classic that it could be 68, 73 now, which is what I really like about it. And we're going to have the link to it for the YouTube stuff that you have out there, because it's classic. So it's kind of timeless. And as are the lyrics, inspired by writers that were timeless.
Thanks, I appreciate that. But yeah, I feel like there's like this need to like I feel like in terms of like these ideas of rebellion, resistance, and finding alternative pathways, like being able to look to the past and understand how people did it before. And I feel like that's part of like one of those literary connections with what happened during that period of time. People were looking for these things that existed before and putting it was bricolage. They're putting these bits and pieces back together to create something new and to create like a momentum towards a different kind of future.
Well, and also, again, really important about all of us and them at that period was as we shat in the face of history, we did not care at the time or in the future whether it would be recognized because we made the documents that would be there. And that to me is what was most important. And that's why you have to sometimes look to the past for music, for literature, for art, because if you don't like what's going on now because of the focus of the crap that, they focus on the crap, not that there's not good shit happening now, of course there is, but there's a lot of good shit in the past too that didn't even get its just deserved then. And I'm not talking just the 70s, I'm talking back to the 1700s or before. Sometimes you got to look back to find your people that were making the same complaints as are valid now, whether it's the 1700s or the 1970s. And with that, I'm going to say this is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, Sebastian Grappo, and Harlow Crandall. And my favorite name, and so important the work you're doing, Harlow. So happy to know you, my friend.
Thanks, Harlow. Cool. Yeah.
Of course. Thank you, Tim.
This is the Lydian Spin, and we're not going to stop. But we would appreciate any help we can get because, look, our mouths do not run on gas and air alone, occasionally food and drink. So if you wouldn't mind contributing, no contribution, too large or too small. And this is the first time we're asking you. So you know what? You should feel a little guilty because we're just going to keep going whether or not you help us out. Your gain, your loss.
The PayPal is paypal.me/TSD1975. That's paypal.me/TSD1975.
It would help. We're going to keep going. We don't like to beg, and certainly we're not, but actually it's a fucking command. Take it or leave it. Thank you. This is the Lydian Spin.